Hello and welcome those who are here. We'll get started in about 2 minutes. Okay, we'll get started. Thank you those who are here and hanging in at the end of day on Friday. Hopefully this information gets you thinking about ways that you can support positive interactions between the preschoolers you work with and children you work with and yourself. My name is Summer Gunn. I am a professional practice assistant professor at Utah State University in the Department of Special Education and Rehabilitation Counseling. I primarily work with our special education undergraduate students who are seeking their licensure in special education and really focus on the early childhood special education group, preparing those who are going to work in early intervention or in preschool classrooms. I want to hear from you all where you are from. I had it set up, but let me share the screen that has the, oh, I remember what I had to do. Okay, let me share the screen with my questions. If you're able to join this, this is how I'm going to hopefully support some interaction between us. You go to wooclap.com and you enter the code HATFOM, HATFOM. And once we have a couple people here, I will give you guys a question. I want to know who you are and where you're from. I started teaching in Cache County School District, spent a few years in Washington County School District in a preschool classroom, back to Cache County School District, and then up to the university. I've been able to work with early intervention agencies and across the state and have really valued understanding how early intervention supports the dyadic relationship of the parent and child, and how in our preschool settings we can leverage that and support in the way we design interventions. Okay, so I want to hear, what is your professional identity? You might have multiple identities, and that's fine if you respond with multiple answers. If you're not able to use the WooClap to respond and want to respond in the chat too, I'll look for responses there as well. Okay, we have at least one preschool teacher here. Okay, let's see if I refresh it, if it gives me more. Okay, we'll move on, and I'll assume I know a couple names on there, so I know we have at least a couple preschool professionals, a administrator, and one that works in a special education inclusive classroom. Okay. Okay. So the objectives of this presentation, the things that I want to support you all in understanding is that is to understand the ethical importance of assent-based interventions, so that when we're providing support to young children, we're thinking about their um, willingness to be a part of that intervention as we plan those interventions. I also want to help you learn to recognize vocal and non-vocal signals of assent or dissent. Explore strategies to balance those behavior expectations with allowing for individual autonomy of the child, and give you the opportunity to take from this conference strategies that you can apply um, that are related to evidence-based recommendations for fostering trust and collaboration as you're planning interventions that take into account the child's autonomy and choice. The Division for Early Childhood is an organization that supports professionals and families uh, who are interested in working with children, young children with exceptionalities, with disabilities, or at risk of having a disability. And they have recommended practices for practitioners working in the field. The recommended practice under interaction talks about practitioners promote the child's social and emotional development by observing, interpreting, and responding contingently to the range of child's emotional expression. When we learn about the child's signals for assent or that buy-in, that they're willing to persist and participate in a intervention or instructional activity, and we interpret that behavior and respond contingently to the way that they're communicating, we help support their social emotional development. Also, practitioners promote the child's problem-solving behavior by observing, interpreting, and scaffolding in response to the child's growing level of autonomy and self-regulation. So when we think about the interventions that we plan, the instruction that we plan, we want to plan supports that build autonomy or choice and self-regulation. The standards, the professional practice standards for our field, the National Association for the Education of Young Children, or NAEYC, outline that as professionals, we understand and value each child as an individual with unique developmental variations, experiences, strengths, interests, abilities, challenges, learning, and with capacity to make choices. When we consider and work to honor a child's assent and participation, we are valuing and honoring their autonomy, their differences, their individuality. Also, we understand and demonstrate positive, caring, supportive relationships and interactions as the foundation of early childhood education. Educators work with young children. We value that reciprocal relationship with children as the vehicle for helping them learn within our early childhood environments. The Council for Exceptional Early Intervention, Early Childhood Special Education Standards are developed specifically for those professionals working with children with exceptionalities or with disabilities. And they outline that those early childhood providers should demonstrate an understanding of the impact that different theories and philosophies of early learning and development have on assessment, curriculum, intervention, and instructional decisions. So as we think about the impact of the evidence-based practices and the instructional practices that we use to design instruction and intervention in our classroom, we have to think that within the context of the philosophies of early learning, that we need to understand the needs of the child and their social emotional development, as we prepare those instructional activities. Also, that candidates engage in reciprocal partnerships with families and other professionals to facilitate responsive adult-child interactions, interventions, and instruction in support of child learning and development. It's important that when we plan and design our interventions and instruction, that we do so in partnership with families and with the adults in the classroom, so that everyone can help understand how to support the child in developing those skills that will allow them to access their environment in a safe and respectful way, while also honoring their individuality. Okay, so that being said, what is assent? How would we define that? That's kind of a buzzword, especially in the world of behavior analysis. But what is assent? I want to see what you guys have to say about assent, and come over to this clap. Anyone that is on here and wants to participate. In one word or a short phrase, what words do you associate with assent? And if you're not able to join on this woo clap, please share in the chat. Okay, what words do you associate with assent? Okay, I think it's end of day, hard to answer, so I'm gonna come back to the slides. Okay, for me, the words I associate with assent is choice and autonomy. It's similar to the word consent, in that it's part of it, but assent is when somebody can provide a vocal or non-vocal behavior of some kind that can be taken to indicate willingness to participate in services. And that's a definition from the Behavior Analyst Certification Board document. Assent, I don't think I put a slide in here, but assent is different than consent, in that consent, like when we ask parents to sign prior written notice and consent for evaluation or participation in services, that's somebody who has a legal ability to make that choice. So an adult who has stewardship over that child, has guardianship over that child, and they have a clear understanding of the implications of that permission or that consent that they're giving. For young children, they don't always have the cognitive capacity for a clear cognitive understanding of why we're asking them to do the learning activities that we're asking them. But they can provide to you they're willing to participate through their vocal or non-vocal behavior. One thing to consider when we're thinking about consent for learning, or assent for learning, is we have to understand developmental theory. We have to understand how that impacts somebody's ability to be willing to participate. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs identifies that in order for higher learning and self-actualization to occur, there first needs to be a foundation of access to physiological needs, being able to feel well, to have access to food instead of food insecurity, to have shelter and clothing, to have regular sleep. Those things are the foundation that need to be in place for us to gain further learning. Safety and security is the next thing. So, not just actual safety of having a home and having clothing and having food, but having that feeling of safety, and sometimes referred to as felt safety. So, that idea that you can feel calm, that things are predictable and accessible. My children have gone through trauma in their life, and even when they're in environments where I was able to provide them the physiological safety needs as well as that love and belonging, there were still, because they'd been in environments where it was not always consistently provided, they had to gain trust that in this environment there was security and safety before they could move up in those hierarchies to be able to reach self esteem and self actualization where learning can happen. After that feeling of safety and actual safety is love and belonging. And love and belonging is the dyadic relationship, that responsive and reciprocal relationships that are the conditions in which learning can happen. Um, so, my little slide thing didn't work. What we want to make sure is that children, as we think about the interventions or instructions we're designing, that we are making sure, are those physiological needs met, or is there a physiological need that might interfere with their ability to engage in this activity. Children with complex health needs or chronic illness, they may need some physiological needs administered to, or adaptations within the activity, so that those physiological needs are not a barrier to the next step. They need to have predictability in their interactions and routines within the early childhood environment. And that helps to build that trusting relationship. If we design interventions that they feel are aversive in some way, then it can compromise that feeling of safety and security, and they don't get to that place of love and belonging and self esteem. So, we want to keep in mind the child's, as they exhibit assent or dissent, how we can honor that. The USBE least restrictive behavior intervention manual talks about, it's a wonderful manual if you have not pulled it up yet. It's very supportive in thinking about strength-based and student-centered approaches to supporting positive behavior and addressing behavior that could be unsafe in your environment. But they talk about in the manual risk factors and protective factors that may impact a child's ability to demonstrate behaviors that are safe in an environment. So each student may experience different risk factors that can increase the likelihood of poor outcomes. These risk factors might include experiencing unsafe situations in the home, school, or community, lack of food, safe shelter, or supportive social relationships, or the experiencing bullying, discrimination, or abuse. Actively building specific protective factors can prevent or reduce the negative impact of risk factors and improve health outcomes. To do this, teams can highlight the existing strengths and skills of a student, then note where support can be provided to build the student's connection to those protective factors. Understanding what the child's individual risk factors are and addressing those with supportive protective factors as you design your intervention can help to build the capacity for the child to assent to intervention instruction. Positive relationships with caregivers and peers fosters trust, which is essential for participation and risk taking and learning. Because of that, we need those foundation skills, those foundations to be in place of that predictable routine, meeting those basic physiological needs. And when they're in those positive relationships for learning, they can acquire new knowledge or new skills. When they acquire new knowledge and skills, they can move into that esteem and self-actualization as they build fluency with those skills. So when we prioritize a sense of safety, dignity, or honoring choice and inclusion, we prioritize participation and engagement, we prioritize relationships as a vehicle for learning. Children's motivation to learn is increased when their learning environment fosters a sense of belonging, purpose, and agency. Honoring assent, sometimes we can think that means they can get away with anything in my classroom is what you're asking. But that's not at all what assent is. Honoring assent is not children doing whatever they want or giving up your role as the director of the learning experiences, as the teacher. Doesn't mean that there's no need for rules or boundaries. That's a double negative. But honoring assent is not saying we don't need rules. Instead, honoring assent is teaching boundaries and rules can coexist, right? Saying that assent and boundaries, a child saying what they are and are not comfortable with, along with rules, they can coexist. We just need to understand and plan for them existing together while giving the child skills to persist, skills to continue to engage when things are difficult, and skills to ask for the ability to disengage at times in a way that is not harmful to them or others. It also, honoring assent means children have a way to communicate choice and agency. So, one important part of understanding how to honor children's choices or assent is our own view of the problem, I guess. When we reframe our narrative from that deficit or problem-based thinking to a strength-based thinking, we start to understand ways why the child is engaging in behavior the way they are and how we can use the strengths and the interests they have to help build self-regulation skills and other strategies that allow them to persist and learn within environments. So examples of deficit-based approach versus strength-based approach. When our perspectives on individuals, if it's deficit-based, we sometimes see individuals as needing to overcome flaws or deficits. They are somebody who has a problem that we as professionals come in and we help to resolve that problem. When we have a strength-based approach, we see the individual as capable and resourceful and resilient. And we see ourselves coming in as educators that are going to help be a support to facilitate that child to reaching their potential. When we think about our interventions, if we're thinking deficit-based interventions aim to correct or reduce behavior problems, versus interventions aiming to enhance existing strengths and to help teach abilities that will help them overcome challenges that they face. The role of the professional when we're thinking about strength-based approach is that the professional collaborates with the individual to guide them, versus a deficit where we come in as the expert to fix. I am a baby watcher. Hopefully not in a scary way. I just love watching children develop. And one day while watching a mother interacting with her young child who was probably about 9 months old, I was able to see different indicators of development that that child was demonstrating in the way that they moved their body, the way that they interact with their caregiver, the way they were interacting with toys and materials around them. But when I watched her and her temperament, I thought, I know about child development and I know how to support children in learning new skills, but I am not the expert of that child. That caregiver is the expert of that child. The child themselves is the expert of their own experience with an activity. When we see ourselves as that collaborator with the child, with the caregiver, we can use the knowledge that we've been able to acquire as early childhood professionals to be able to support them within their context, within their strengths, and within the things they identify that they want to change for themselves, for their child, or for themselves. When we use a strength-based approach, our outcomes are really to empower and strengthen and leverage those strengths versus eliminating problems. We use language like learn, build tools, instead of fix or deficiency. We're motivated by encouraging that self-efficacy in the child, seeing them get excited about the changes that they can have on their experience. So when we think about child Assent in intervention, their choice to engage or not engage in intervention, we're really using that strength-based approach to care in early childhood. So what does Assent look like? Don't know if I'll have much participation. So if you want to in the chat, or I can come out into the Woo Clap. I want to know what you do to show your Assent. What ways do you show your willingness to participate in an activity? For me, I have a close proximity to the activity. I get closer. I look and I watch. When I was young, I didn't always vocally approach people saying I wanted to participate, but I would stay there. I would be there. Okay. Don't see any answers, so I want you to think about what are your ways of showing that you want to participate in an activity. The article that I shared with the materials that I provided to the conference from Brooks and Smith 2023, where they talk about Assent within intervention and Assent overall. They talk about some kind of typical topographies or typical ways that people demonstrate that they're willing to participate or not. They might vocally say yes, or something equivalent to that, like yeah, or they'll use words related to the activity that are positive in nature. They might nod, they might show they're ready to start by doing the initial action of the activity. Maybe you have a choice board and they make a choice, or they say yes, they want to participate when you provide a yes/no question. They might smile, they might reach for materials, or grab the materials in order to engage. They might enter the area where the activity is happening or approach and sit near participants. Um, if you don't want to participate or the child doesn't want to participate and they're withdrawing their assent, some typical examples of what that might look like is them saying no or saying stop, maybe screaming or yelling or walking away, um, repeatedly trying to talk about a different topic or something else. Um, they might shake their head no or ignore. Sorry, went forward without meaning to. Ignore, lean away, turn their body away, close their eyes, try to escape, try to get away from the activity. Those are all ways that they may be showing that they do not want to participate in this activity. Um, each child, though, is unique in the way that they express their willingness or non-willingness to participate. So they might do more typical. These are children. The first one, she is more typical. She will tell you when she wants to participate through enthusiastic yes. When she doesn't want to participate, she will tell you straightforward with no or I don't like that. The second one in, she will be more hesitant and more quiet. And I'll know that she wants to participate. Even her facial expressions are showing some discomfort and restraint. She'll still persist in participating, even when it's uncomfortable. And she hasn't withdrawn her assent to participate, even when her facial expressions show that this is not pleasant. The one in the middle with the rolled back eyes, when he shows his withdrawal from an activity, that he no longer wants to participate in an activity, he will start making silly faces, say odd things. He will roll his head around in order to show that he's withdrawing assent. But he will be really kind of quiet and watchful and thoughtful when he is wanting to engage. The one little boy on the end with the hat, he has some vocal chained sounds that he'll say as part of self-regulation. That sounds similar to loud laughter and laughing, but he will make that sound when he wants to engage and when he doesn't want to engage. And so we have to look for other signs of his willingness to participate outside of that vocal stem that he uses. We watch for his orientation to the activity. He usually has delayed responses to the activity, that you ask or talk about something and probably about 15 seconds later he responds to something that happened in the activity, and that's how you know that he is willing to participate and engage in the activity. So with the children you interact with, it's really important to understand their own unique characteristics and the way that they demonstrate their willingness to participate or their assent and their withdrawal of assent. Okay. We want to make sure that children understand how to give their agreement or their assent and withdraw in a way that keeps them safe, that helps them learn, and gives them opportunities to grow. So we want to help teach some of those self-advocacy skills and target those within our early childhood classrooms. So some might be appropriate refusal or removal of non-preferred activities. Socially mediated ways to refuse an activity would be to say no, or say I'm all done, or I need a break, or it's time to stop. Self-mediated ways might be walking away, or putting their head down to signal they need a break. Again, we want to do these within the expectations of the classroom routine, to teach them how to also self-regulate so that they can return to the activity, if it's a learning activity that they need to engage in to make progress within the curriculum. Other ways for self-advocacy is to ask for help, um, teaching them ways to seek help from their peers or the adults in the classroom, or ask for an alternative activity, so a modification to the activity or an accommodation to the activity. I have a child that would continue to engage in an activity that was not their preferred if they had with them something that was preferred. So a transition item from home that they could keep with them. They were able to come in, even though they were showing expressions of discomfort, they were still willing on their own to come in and participate in the activity with that comfort item, where when that comfort item wasn't present, there was more withdrawal signaling behaviors. So teaching them for some kind of, to ask for some kind of modification or adaptation to the activity is a form of teaching self-advocacy. We also want to teach choice making and problem solving. So understanding how to select a choice can be a skill that some children need support in learning. Understanding how to express preferences, showing what they like or what they dislike in a way that others understand and that keeps them and others safe. How to persist in challenging tasks. So problem solving, trying varied behavior to try to get to the solution, can be another strategy in helping them learn choice making and problem solving so that they can persist at activities where they may have previously just said, I'm not going to participate in this, and withdraw their assent. If we can teach them these self-advocacy skills, choice making and problem solving, we can help to support them. When we want to help teach these skills, we need to do it at a time where an aversive event is not the main thing of the activity, main thing in their face, right? We don't want to wait until they are dysregulated, they are upset, they are withdrawing their consent in order to teach them. We want to teach them in times where they have better emotional regulation, where their preferences are present. So we want to include it as part of our curriculum, teaching children to make choices, to label their emotions, to ask their friends if they want to participate, to understand when there's a refusal by an adult or another child, how to move on from that refusal from someone else. So including it as part of your curriculum is important. Before a challenge occurs, rehearsing what to do when a challenge might happen. So if you know there's an activity that a child in your environment needs to be a part of that is challenging for them, before the activity, you might rehearse strategies for appropriate withdrawal, for that self-advocacy of asking for a break, of walking over to the calming corner, of asking for help. You'd rehearse those before the event. Using some direct child-focused instruction, you also want to embed opportunities for success within activities. So using like environmental sabotage to set up an environment where the child is highly supported, and then giving them opportunity to use that assent behavior or withdrawal and honoring it within that activity. You want to make sure that strategies that you're using to teach them to self-advocate, to make choices, and to problem solve and persist, that they are chosen in cooperation or collaboration with the caregivers so that they can be ones that will fit not just the childcare or the early childhood environment, but also the home environment and can be reinforced and taught there. And you also want to make sure that you think about supporting um, within functional activities um, where the child can make a choice and remain safe. Um, we want to support their ability to give their assent or withdraw their assent within those functional activities. Always making database decisions about whether the intervention is supporting that positive strength-based interaction is really important. So you want to take a data on that assent and assent withdrawal. So if you have a behavior change plan that you've put in place and you're trying to support positive behavior, you want to take data on like, is the behavior changing? But you may also want to take data on like, what signals are we seeing their willingness to participate in this plan, and their unwillingness to participate, so that you can understand not just is the behavior changing, but is the child able to engage in this behavior change, or is it something that they will functionally choose to engage in the future. Use that data to make adjustments within your intervention as well. So it's really important to teach those skills. And the National Center for Pyramid Model Innovation, has lots of wonderful resources. So I wanted to share with you some of the resources that they have for teaching self-regulation, persistence, communication of willingness to participate. The first, and each of these has a QR code that can take you to that page, but I also included them in the materials that I submitted for the conference, and you can find them at challengingbehavior.org, the resource tab. The first one is teaching them what to do when they become upset within an activity. So this strategy is called the relaxation thermometer. It comes with both the visual and a short explanation of how you might teach a child to use the relaxation thermometer. Child becomes upset and wants to withdraw from an activity. You might have them go to their relaxation thermometer, identify where on that thermometer they feel at the moment, and then use a strategy like taking deep breaths to bring them down so that they're ready to engage again in the activity that they had withdrawn their assent from. Other strategies is like the pinwheel activity. Smell the flowers, blow the pinwheel, to teach some self-regulation. Smell the flower, blow the pinwheel. In my classroom, we had like these flowers that were like big and floppy and made from soft fabric that I got from the dollar store for them to go over and smell, and pinwheels for them to blow, so that they could practice this skill during choice time in our preschool classroom. A time where it could be embedded within an activity. And then when they were having challenges, we could reference to that skill. Also, the pyramid model has this character that they have all sorts of resources around called Tucker the Turtle. They have videos, they have social stories, they have classroom posters that you can put around the room to teach them the turtle technique. And when Tucker Turtle becomes upset, he becomes mad, he says, "I'm mad," and he tucks into his shell and counts to 3. And when he pops out, he's going to think of a solution to his problem and evaluate the solution and try it out. The Tucker Turtle is another strategy, like smelling the flower, blowing the pinwheel, or the thermometer strategy. My own child was struggling in his early childhood years with some emotional regulation, and we had to make things physical for him so that he could move things around when he was mad. So we had jars of different colors to represent the different emotions that he might be feeling. And I had sticks that matched the colors of the jar. And when he was upset, he would go over and he could move a stick into the jar. Later on, when he was feeling calm, he'd move that yellow stick into the calm and happy jar. We had gray sticks that represented sad, because a lot of the reason he was feeling strong emotion is because he was sad. He wanted something he couldn't have. And then we had the red sticks for mad. He found when he was physically doing that, and I recognized the emotion that he was expressing and said it out loud, that he could work through why he was disengaging from the activity. And oftentimes stating it allowed us to either resolve why it was really hard to be a part of the activity, or allowed him to express it and learn how to persist anyways. So we had that both in our home and also in his early childhood environment, where he could express in a similar way to his teacher as well as his caregiver, his parent at home. Other strategies, this is one from the challengingbehavior.org, a lesson plan that they have that you can do with a small group, a whole group, or an individual child, where you have a stop sign, a stop and go sign, and you have them go when there's a picture of a strategy for or a behavior that is appropriate in your environment, and stop when there's a picture of a behavior that's not appropriate in your environment. So teaching them to discriminate between the two can help them learn what the expectations are when you're feeling uncomfortable, and when there's something that you want or don't want in the classroom. There's also solution boards. I really like these solution boards and the visuals that they have. But when there is a problem, there's different solutions that you can pick. Using the visuals and having those present in the classroom is a way for children who have a hard time coming up with ideas of how they can respond different than maybe the behavior that they were doing before. Having those visuals quickly for them to get can be a good alternative. In my preschool classroom, we came up with solutions to common problems that happened in the classroom, mostly around that they have something that I want and they're not giving it to me. Or I don't like having to write my name, or do paper pencil activities. Some of those common challenges in an early childhood environment, we thought about what are those challenges and what are some solutions we can come up with. And I used visuals like this to help them facilitate a conversation about what the solutions could be. We took pictures of the children modeling those solutions, printed them off, and put them in a book along with a transcription of what the children said were those strategies. And we had that in our classroom. As we introduced that, children started to go up to the teacher to talk about their problem or to say they weren't going to do something. And the teacher would say, you come up with a solution and point towards the solution book. And the children would go over and grab that solution book and come up with a solution. Usually, just grabbing that book together with their friend was enough to help them want to engage with their friend. Um, but having them themselves be a part of that solution can really help them identify ways that they can solve their problems. Teaching them a process for problem solving is also very important. This process with visuals on challengingbehavior.org has the 4 steps. You have to identify the problem, think of a solution, and then evaluate that solution. So, is it fair? Is it safe? And how would everyone feel? So, how does my solution impact others? As educators, when we're trying to get children to participate in activities that maybe are challenging for them, if we help them think, what is the problem? Why is this challenging for me? What are some solutions I could try? And is it going to be safe? Is it going to help others feel safe as well? And then help them try it and evaluate, was that safe? Did that help you persist? Did that help you learn? Okay, that was the material that I have for you guys today. We have 10 minutes left. I've had low participation in my plea to ask you guys to share any thoughts or questions you have. But if anybody's still around and wants to share in the chat, I would love to hear any challenges that you might perceive there might be with thinking about allowing children to decide if they want to participate in a type of intervention or not. It's kind of a big, scary thing to turn over that to children. I know for most of my career, working in applied behavior analysis, we used their preferences and we tried to make it as fun as possible, but there were some situations that just are not safe. And there's this tendency to say, well, I'm keeping them safe by providing this intervention. That can exist while also understanding what their vocal and non-vocal signals are to show that they have buy-in to this intervention. Does anybody out there have any thoughts or questions? I see Jennifer said challenging behavior website is awesome. I totally agree. One thing that I really love about it too is that many of the resources are available for in various languages. So if you live in a part of the state that has children attending your program that their families speak a different language at home and their parents read in a different language, you can provide those same materials. You can provide this problem solving strategy in both English and Spanish and German and Portuguese and Chinese to those families among many other languages that are available. They also have notes, like the material in a form for a newsletter that can go home so that you can support this happening at home as well as in your early childhood setting.
Hey, Summer, I have a question. You were talking about one of the challenges is, meeting the child where they are, encouraging them to really be an active participant in the problem solving and generating solutions. And how sometimes it's a little bit tricky to to have that motivation. Do you have any suggestions for how, what we can do as adults when we're working with children to help support or at least encourage children's motivation to become problem solving in social situations?
Yeah, that's a good question and tricky, and it really takes understanding the individual child's dynamics to understand how you can support them. I think the best thing as an adult working with young children is to start to key into those nonverbal cues that they give you and to figure out how to honor those in order to leverage that relationship to help motivate them. Um, when I'm trying to think of a good example, like with the one boy that I showed in that had that where he would do the loud laughter, until I really like he would laugh really really loud all the time, and I thought, man, he's having a good time with himself, but really like I was not keyed into um, his other cues that he was showing. And once I keyed into those other cues, I was able to better leverage his interests in making choices. So his strategy now, instead of like screaming or laughing really loud and disrupting his little kindergarten class, is that he catches his scream in his elbow and lets it fizzle down because for him, like he still needed to get that scream out, but if he had a way to deal with it, catching it and letting it fizzle down, and then he loves math, and he picked a random number that he was gonna count to by threes or by sixes or by sevens, um, and that would help him regulate and go through his social script to re-enter the activity. Where before it was like, we just gotta kind of push him along to participate because he needs to be there. And when he like screams, we have to tell him like we don't make noise in the activity. When we gave him instead a way to still express himself, and then thumbs up for everyone, express himself, and then turn that into something that he preferred as a coping strategy, he was much better at regulating. Still working on it, but much better.
Yeah, there's a interesting comment from Jennifer in the chat. It says that she's a preschool, an aide in preschool classrooms. They find that classrooms that allow kids to choose to participate rather than force are more calm. Have you seen any evidence, or have you seen examples of how empowering children to have choices rather than kind of like forcing them? Not really. Yeah, forcing is a strong word, but yes. Have you seen evidence that allowing choice helps to support behavior?
Yeah, yeah. There's lots of research on that more recently. In the field of applied behavior analysis, it is definitely like a budding area of research using preference assessments, but also using like individuals' social validity of the intervention. They see that when there's a better fit to the individual's choice in the intervention, there are better outcomes in the intervention. Um, it takes a shift away from the more structured, direct teaching that was kind of the go to in the 90s and early 2000s to a more individualized, autonomy based teaching. In order for it to be successful, if you still have a very highly structured teacher directed environment, it's not going to match up with allowing for choice. But if you provide that more, like the literature around trauma based intervention, if you can incorporate some of that um, calming corner and sensory diet within the learning activities, within the learning environment, it allows for an opportunity for choice in those as you're thinking about that, like that experience of being in the classroom instead of just the things that you're learning in the classroom. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for your time. I hope that this was helpful and that you've come away with some tools to use. If you have other questions about um, how to support as you're designing these strategies and intervention and instruction for young children that are maybe not wanting to join in, if you want some more support and strategies, you're always welcome to email me, and I can either try to help you or connect you with people who are near you that also know. So thank you and have a good evening.